Good afternoon, everyone. You are most welcome to our first big public lecture of the year. This is for me hotly anticipated. I work in artificial intelligence. My name is Ulrich, and I'm the director here at AIMS in South Africa. If you follow artificial intelligence, for most people in government, the public, and academics, it's like a Martian that dropped out of space. And everyone's wondering, what do we do with this strange new thing in our midst? And I'm really thankful for everyone who's supporting us, especially the Austrian government and the Austrian embassy who is sponsoring this event. Helga who will introduce a little bit, who is visiting us from Vienna specifically for this public talk. With all the thank yous and welcomes that we'll do in a little bit, I want to tell you a little bit about the African Institute of Mathematics, where you are seated now. For who of you is this the first visit to AIMS? Okay, who of you came out of sheer curiosity of AI or because of what's happening to this building? Yes. So I'll tell you a small bit about AIMS, and then we'll go and talk about artificial intelligence. My name is Ulrich, as I mentioned, and I direct this wonderful Pan-African Institute. Here is a quote. In the picture, we have Neil Turok, who's the founder of AIMS. We have Nelson Mandela, and we have Stephen Hawking, one of the most famous theoretical physicists we ever lived. And one of them said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Which of these three famous gentlemen said it? You all look at the answers. Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon that you could use to change the world. And this is our mission at the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences. We use education, we invest in young people, specifically in mathematical sciences, not for today or tomorrow, but to change the world in the future. And the building that you are in, where AIMS, that houses AIMS, was an old hotel. It's almost like an hotel for the students. This is the old Rio Grande Hotel in Luxembourg that was built in 1931. You can imagine the world coming out of the roaring 20s, being a pink Cadillac outside of this old Art Deco building. This was purchased just over 20 years ago when Neil Turok's father, Ben Turok, who was a member of parliament, encouraged him to open a mathematical sciences institute in Africa. As an interesting fact, in the first democratic government in South Africa, there were two married couples. Can you guess who they were? First one is easy, Nelson and Winnie Mandela. The second one's not so obvious. Ben and Mary Turok, who were instrumental in starting and founding AIMS here in Luxembourg. And they purchased this hotel just over 20 years ago in a public auction that was held in this room. It's very derelict building there. Our hope is to restore AIMS to its Art Deco glory, to make it hip, young, and fresh. And this is what AIMS looks like today. AIMS, in a nutshell, has centers in 5 different countries across Africa. Starting in South Africa, we have centers in Senegal, in Cameroon, in Rwanda, and in Ghana. And to date, we've graduated more than 3,000 students in master's degrees in mathematics across all of Africa. So we're not just South African, we're really a Pan-African Mathematics Institute. We have a research center across the road where many interesting things are studied. I'll give you a sneak preview of what some of our students do. This was last weekend. This was a course that students are doing for machine learning and ecology, monitoring wildlife and bird songs and endangered species. And there are some of our students putting up recording devices in game reserves across Cape Town. This weird thing at the top, you think, is this a background? That is a spectrogram. It's part of an AI algorithm that actually analyzes audio. So that's what our students do. They're really grounded in reality. And this is where we are at the moment. So this is a short story of AIMS in South Africa. I would now like to invite Romana Kunigman from the Austrian Embassy. She's the Austrian ambassador in South Africa to say a few words about the Austrian Embassy and then welcome Helga to the stage. Thank you very much. And please welcome Romana.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ulrich. Can you hear me? I hope, yeah, it's working well. Dear Director of AIM South Africa, dear Ulrich Baquet and your team, dear ambassadors and colleagues, dear professors, members of the board, dear Honorary Consul of Austria, who is also here, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, and also dear members of the community who are also here. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have a very mixed audience here. It's very exciting for me to be here. It's my first time to be inside of AIMS, and it was also very exciting to learn from Ulrich what all the things that are going on here. It's a great honor for me to be here as the Austrian ambassador to South Africa, to present to you a very distinguished Austrian scholar. It's Professor Helga Nowotny, who is sitting here with us and who will be giving the talk shortly. I don't want to take too much of the time that we will need for the discussion about a very exciting topic, but I will just say a few words about Professor Nowotny. She's a professor emerita of Science and Technology Studies at the ETH Zurich and a founding member and former president of the European Research Council. And she's held so many functions and distinctions. I don't want to cite them all because it would take a lot of our time, but we feel very privileged as Austrian Embassy to welcome Professor Nowotny for the first time, not only to South Africa, I think also to Sub-Saharan Africa. So I think this is a very important message. We see it's an important topic, and it's also a very learned person who's going to present her vision of AI today here. And let me also say thank you to Ulrich, to Rejoice and the team briefly, because it's not been an easy thing to get it all up and running until the last moment. The flags came late, some other things didn't happen on time, but everything works out in the end. So we're very happy about your enthusiasm, how after our offer to have this lecture together, you've always been supportive and really great to work with. I just want to mention that as well. Just a few words about the CV of Professor Nowotny here today. Her academic career started in law, which I thought was very interesting, and then she moved on to new challenges in new fields. She's holding a PhD in sociology from Columbia University, and she's been teaching and doing research in many numerous prestigious institutions like King's College. She worked in Cambridge, Berlin, Paris, Budapest, Vienna, of course, to name just a few. And she has published over 300 scientific articles in journals and scientific journals and many books. And the latest being one of the reasons why she's here today, it's called In AI We Trust, Power, Illusion and Control of Predictive Algorithms, which was released just a few years ago. And when I heard about this book, and I heard actually a radio program on it, I thought this is so exciting and interesting. It's relating different fields. It's not just most of you are mathematical scientists or computer scientists, but also the sociological perspective, or just to see the topic from a more holistic approach. I thought that was something very exciting we can present to you here today. And now the title of today's public lecture by Professor Nowotny is The Illusion of Control, Wisdom and Regulation of AI. I don't want to take more of the time here on the podium. I think we should jump straight into the topic. So Professor Nowotny, can I ask you to come to the podium? Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe I can use the content back and forth. Yes, and this I moved forward and backward. No, I put all of this. And I need to hold on to this. So it's quite close. Yeah. So thank you very much, Ambassador from Königsbrunn, and thank you, Ulrich Paquet, and thanks everyone for being here for this afternoon and giving me the opportunity to speak to you about a topic that concerns all of us. We all have had the experience. Can you hear me in the back with the microphone? Does it work? Yes? Okay. It is something that concerns all of us, and many of us have been surprised when just in November 2022, ChatGPT hit the scene, and many people who had never touched much of a computer before all of a sudden were drawn into what this new AI can do. But as already mentioned by Ambassador Königsbrunn, I want to give you a bit of the larger picture. And I want to begin with origin stories. What are origin stories? Every civilization, every culture has a story. Where do we come from? Where does humanity come from? And according to George Dyson, who is the son of the physicist Freeman Dyson, he wrote a book about the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, where much of what we are using today took place in the years in the 40s and 50s last century. And he wrote a book with the title Turing's Cathedral, because it was Turing in 1936 who wrote the foundational mathematical paper about what was to become artificial intelligence. The term did not exist at that time, it was much later. And according to George Dyson, he said there are two kinds of origin stories. One origin story says life came from the mud, from the earth, and the other story is life came from the sky. You may recognize some of these origin stories. And Dyson said we are now in the digital age, and we also need an origin story. Where does it come from? He says it came in the space between mud and sky, between mud, the hardware, and code, the software. And this is the origin story that I want to relate to you as well. Now, every origin story has its heroes. And heroes are these great figures, very often they are men, who do fantastic deeds. They combat enemies. They produce new things, sometimes weapons against the enemies. And part of this is also here. Alan Turing wrote the mathematical foundations, but the person who actually built the first working computer was John von Neumann in the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton. Turing stayed only for a very short time because he returned to the UK. And the electronic numerical integrator and computer was built and running for the first time in 1945, followed by the MANIAC, mathematical analyzer, numerical, and integrator. Now, where were the enemies? The enemies was Nazi Germany, because these were the years where in Princeton, together with the Manhattan program in Los Angeles, building of the atomic bomb as the weapon was going on. And in those days, computers were people. They were mostly women doing the calculations. So when we were speaking about computer in those days, it was mostly women doing the calculations. And here, in order to speed up the process of calculating, this is what was driving ENIAC and later ENIAC, and of course, the aim was to help in designing weapons against the enemy.
And part of the origin story continues the AI winter that perhaps Ulrich remembers, but I think the others in the audience were too young, when funding for AI right now was surprisingly seen today, because the way how the AI field progressed, namely to emulate symbolic logic. And people thought at that time, the way how to progress is we get the logics right, we get the symbols right, and then we will succeed. But the success did not really come. Then funding dried up, and people called it the AI winter. But after winter, there comes spring. And it also came to the AI field with the neural networks and machine learning that started around the turn of the century. And since then, we have heroic fights and victories. We had Deep Blue, the chess playing computer that beat best chess player Kasparov. We had other feats. We had notably DeepMind vindicating the best Go player of the world. And we had AlphaFold, again, a fantastic way. So these are the origin stories. But I want to convince you that it's not only the origin stories that count, but also technologies. They may come from the mud and fall from the sky, but that's not the whole story. Technologies is never about technologies alone. And again, I think there are two strands, two lineages that come together here. One is automation, and the other one is what I call outsourcing of cognitive skills. Now, automation is also very, very old. The German automaton comes from Greek, and it was a thing that moved on its own. It was a mechanical device, a tripod, which you could pull some strings and you made it run on its own. And then people were playing in China who have birds that were seemingly automatically flying and so on. In the European Renaissance, we had beautiful fountains that were installed. They were all driven by the processes of automation. And today we have a lot of our manufacturing that runs on automation. But with AI, it also moves over, and we have something like automatic decision making. So it's not just the physical labor, but we move also to the cognitive processes. And this is where outsourcing comes in. Humans cannot do everything. We have limitations, physical limitations, cognitive limitations. We are not so fast in what we do, and so on. And so we started outsourcing. And writing is one of the first outsourcings that happened, because words were written on stone or on paper or in other, if you think of the cuneiform, in the kind of mud that was being burned. And writing meant all of a sudden that you had outsourced what normally people had to remember. It was human memory that you could now entrust to a material where you would record what you were saying. And of course, the first recordings were about numbers, and numbers related to commerce, to trade, to taxes. Taxation was one of the first drivers in these empires in order to tell people, we agreed you have to pay so and so much. Or in a business deal, you agreed to pay so and so much. And this became part of this outsourcing. Then, of course, the outsourcing goes on, and I will say a little bit more about printing and the printing press. And I wonder whether today we are not in a situation where indeed, there's a convergence when you think of generative AI. Sorry, I touched here. No. Generative AI, where we have text, we have images, we have sounds that are both part of the outsourcing because we leave it to the AI to produce things for us, but it also is automated. We are not completely in control of it. Now, a very brief historical glance backwards, and I want to take you to the printing press. Printing press had a huge impact, and Elizabeth Eisenstadt is an American historian. She wrote a classical book, 3 volumes, The Printing Press as an Agent of Change. And I want to take it as a reference point because today, very often we are told AI is an agent of change. And I want to raise the question with you, where's the real agent of change? Now, the printing press, as most of you know, it was invented around 1436 in a small town in Germany, but already the Chinese were using wooden blocks in order to print in the way back before Christ. We know that in Korea you had a metal type for printing, but it did not take off the same way as the printing press. So we can ask, it's not the technology alone, it's the way how a society absorbs, integrates, changes in order to take up the technology. And with the printing press, all of a sudden, you had new ways of doing things. So you needed workshops for printing, and to educate young people who know how to move the print. You needed paper, you needed supply of paper, trading paper, and you needed financing all this. The biggest impact it had was on ideas, because the function of the printing press was communicating ideas. And it had a huge impact on modern science, because all of a sudden, for instance, if you were a botanist, people had to make drawings of the plant. They were sharing what they knew about the plant, what it looked like, etc., in a drawing. And of course, every artist and every designer, graphic designer, had their own style, even if they tried to be as accurate as possible. Always varied. All of a sudden, you had a printed version of it, people could share it and refer to it. So it was a form of standardized. And also with regard to scientific publications, it helps to speed up the way how scientists communicate. It had a huge impact on religion because Protestants insisted that by now everyone can read the Bible, and you no longer need a priest to tell you what was written in the Bible. And it had a huge impact on the European Enlightenment to spread the ideas that there is a universal aspiration, and with all the flaws that the European Enlightenment had, nevertheless, it helped to strengthen this belief there is reason and we can improve the human condition if we follow reason. So the impact was huge. But who was the real agent? Was it just the printing press? Or was it coming together of the venture capital that was needed, new modes of financing? You needed networks of various kinds in order to get it going. You needed a readership. And in those days, many people also in Europe were illiterate. So it helped to stimulate literacy, because people wanted to partake and participate in this new culture of reading. So it's a metaphor when we speak about technology as an agent of Technology is an important ingredient. It can trigger change, but it needs all these other factors that must come together in specific ways to have such an impact. Now, with AI, as I said before, many people were surprised, even experts, how amazing generative AI ChatGPT could perform. And this kind of amazement, of course, is still with us. We are learning some of the limitations, especially with regard to the question, potential is here, but also concerns are here. And it raises the question, are we still in control of this new latest technology that we now have with us? And the concerns are about jobs, obviously. This is of enormous importance. And every economist, they don't know the answer. Every economist will assure you, on the basis of past experience, there will be new jobs that will be created. Some of the new jobs that are being created already. But no one can tell you, will they be created fast enough in time, in sufficient numbers to replace the jobs that undoubtedly will be lost, because the new technology has this attractive feature. It is faster, it is more efficient, it replaces human labor, and therefore it is very attractive for business and for other purposes. So this is one of the worries. Then another worry is about deep fakes. And as you know, AI is able to put a face on a body that does not exist on that body. It can make a person, using the person's genuine voice, say things that the person never said and never would say. And there are so many examples that we know already how deepfakes can really disturb and distract and also erode election processes. So it's a threat also to the way how we want our democracies to function. And if deepfakes are part of the way how we relate to each other, who can we still trust? Trust is the social glue that holds society together. We no longer know, is this genuine, fake? What is the basis of our living together? How can we form a government trust in election outcomes if we don't know? And then there is, of course, the question of bias, of discrimination. And those of you who work with data know how much the source of the data matters, how much the quality of the data matters, but also there are many phenomena in life, in many parts in the world where we have no data. There's a kind of, black hole, and we have no data, and then other people come and try to fit this. I was recently speaking to someone here in Cape Town, in fact, about African cities, and how an MIT professor comes with big data and thinks he can explain the way how African cities function by using big data. And he had to discover how many data would be necessary in order to have a good governance, know how to run just don't exist. So this is part of, the data are important, but we must always ask, what is the source? What is the quality? Where are things where we have no data, where it would be good to have data? Then there's discrimination. And then you also know that, for instance, in facial recognition, technology has difficulties in recognizing dark skin and women's faces. Just does not do as well as recognizing the faces of white men. And all these are concerns that need to be taken very, very seriously. And in addition, there is this deep-seated fear. There is now the technology, we don't quite know how it does it. Even experts will tell you they have no idea of the data you have, your algorithm, you know what the outcome is. I'm not really sure what happens. And then there's this fear, are we losing control? And deep-seated fear, because as humans, we want to be in control. We want to have a sense we can master our life, our environment. And finally, there are these anthropomorphic tendencies. What is an anthropomorphic tendency? We think very often that the things we are relating to are like humans, like living beings. When you are angry with a thing, you curse the thing, you say, you stupid thing, you lose your key, and you say, you stupid thing, why did you not call me instead of getting lost? Your computer does not work, you speak to your computer and say, you stupid thing, get going. So these are deeply inbuilt tendencies that we have. Philosopher Daniel Dennett has written a whole book about it. He calls it intentional stance, why this is part of how our mind functions. Now, we have this technology that is deliberately designed to make us believe that we speak with another human being. Even if the AI now has to tell you, sorry, I cannot answer this question, I'm not a human being. Nevertheless, lures you in, makes you believe, plays with these atoms. And this can be very harmful. And there was recently a case in Belgium where a man committed suicide. He had mental problems and he had spoken with a so-called therapeutic AI, it was a previous generation, but no. And the AI at one point told him the best solution for your problems is to commit suicide, and he did. And this is, an extreme case. It shows that something needs to be done. Because if we let the technology do what it wants to do, we will lose control. So what is the mechanism behind it really? What is our relationship? I'm puzzled about this when I started to write my book that Anna mentioned. I was struck by the fact that the existing literature was either technical enthusiasm or it was dystopian vision. It will just wipe us out and it's all terrible. And I tried to find a middle way because the world does not just exist of utopias and dystopias. We cannot live of utopias alone, nor should we slide into dystopias. And then I thought, well, one of the main driving forces is the very old wish of all humans to know the future. And again, if I can go back to every culture in the world that we know of practiced divination. The means were different. In China, they used so-called oracle bones, which meant you're taking the shoulder blade of a sheep, holding it over fire, cracks appeared in it. And then the divinator was an expert, would tell the ruler, it's good to move to war or not, or what the fate would be. And every culture has such divination practices. Now, in the so-called modern world, we no longer practice divination, at least not officially, but we have reports we like to write reports. Every government has foresight exercise. It reports what will happen in 2030, 2040, 2050. You look at the bookshelves and reports coming out of every international organization, every government. So we are obsessed with this idea. We want to know more about the future. And we want to know more about the future because we want to be able to prepare to go. So what's wrong with it? Nothing. And now we have predictive algorithms. Just as with divination, you have to be careful. And the Chinese, shaman or whatever you call the person, was also an expert in social relations. Because if he told the ruler, you will win the next war, and it turned out to be a defeat and disaster, can you imagine what the fate of this shaman would have been? So we have to be very careful about what he was saying. And we have to be careful with the way how we treat predictive algorithms. Because they tell us something about the future. We use it all the time. But we tend to forget. Predictive algorithms use data that comes from the past. They don't know the future. Nobody knows the future. Future is inherently uncertain. It remains uncertain. But of course, for certain prognosis, we can rely on data of the past, but it can always be otherwise. The unpredictable can happen, unprecedented can happen, it will happen. And so there's always this caution that we have to be prepared. And then prediction is great for science, but then you test your predictions. And depending on the testing, you know, this prediction has a solid theory or not, or it is wrong. And in social life, we have very few possibilities to test our predictions. And then people tend to believe what will happen, and if they act in accordance with their beliefs, may actually happen. Most famous example is from the 1930s, during the Depression in the US. This is where the term self-fulfilling prophecy actually comes from. People started to believe the bank will no longer be liquid, so everyone rushed to the bank to take out their money. The consequence was the bank had no longer money for those who wanted to have a savings bank. This is sort of the archetype of self-fulfilling prophecy, when people believe that it will happen, if they act accordingly, it will actually happen. And this is the kind of scenario, the kind of danger we have to keep in mind when we start to rely and attribute agency to the machine. Then, of course, what we see is an enormous concentration of economic power. Economic power very often goes hand in hand with political power, so there is a close correlation there. And of course, the conclusion we have to draw from that, we cannot just let it do the technology what it wants to do. And then the cause for ethics comes in and for regulation. Now, part of my title was about the illusion of control. And the illusion of control is a tricky concept, because if you are in an illusion of any kind, you don't know that you are in an illusion. You only find out after you had a harsh confrontation with reality. And it can be very painful. And then you know, I was in an illusion. And therefore, those who believe they have complete control over technology. We know some people like Elon Musk who think they have unlimited power and are in control. This can have very negative consequences, because there may be a confrontation with reality coming, not just for an individual, but for everyone else. But there is also the other side. We can fall into the illusion of not being in control. When people feel, we just cannot do anything. There are all these powerful technologies, powerful corporations. We have no say. We are powerless people. Then it's also the illusion of not being in control. And we have to find this kind of balance. Now, ethics is something that comes up in every conversation about AI. Nobody has anything against ethics. We are all for ethics. But there are problems how to go about, how to implement it, how to agree. What kind of ethics is, what kind of principles do we have? There was a study done in ETH Zurich a couple of years ago where people looked at ethical guidelines by official ethical guidelines. Half of them came from governments and half of them from large corporations. So they had about 50 ethical guidelines from governments from all around the world and 50 from the business world. They were looking, what are the ethical principles that show up in these official documents? There was no consensus. And the only criteria that almost reached 50% was transparency of affairs. So there is no agreement even on the principle. Everyone thinks it's good to be fair, to be transparent, to be responsible. Everyone agrees on that. But then if you look where's the evidence, you don't see which criteria comes out. So this is one problem. Other problem we have with ethical criteria is how to implement them. Those of you who work with algorithms, those of you who work with computer machines, know it needs to be very clear in your instructions. And so how do you really implement something that we call fairness? First of all, would we agree, and how fast would we agree here in the room what we understand by fairness? And I can assure you we would discuss for hours, because somebody in the last row would get up and say, but in this instance, tell us life story, this we would all agree this is not fair, but it does not help our definition of fairness. So it is very, very difficult to reach an agreement and to put this into a way that it can be implemented. People continue to try, and this is fine. And we have certain principles that we follow. Just saying it is very, very difficult to do that. Because in human life, and this is one of the differences, context matters. And as humans, we have an understanding. In this context, we would say this is fair. In other contexts, we would say this is completely unfair. But how do you teach this to the machine? Because there is something that started in Vienna called the Manifesto for Digital Humanism, Technical University of Vienna in 2019, that issued a manifesto for digital humanism. And the idea was, to center the development of AI around human values. And this is something, of course, to be followed. I just want to emphasize it is very, very difficult. So, and then there's human ambiguity. We also know AI is not good at irony. It can be very ironic. Even if it learns to make jokes, the jokes are not that funny as the jokes that humans make. It cannot be ironic, and it cannot tolerate ambiguity. Part of human living together depends on ambiguity. If we would always say what we think, most of us would be offended by what we hear. And so, this is part of being polite also. So ambiguity is part of the way how we communicate as humans. Machine cannot understand these nuances. So again, there are difficulties, people are working on it, And of course, the best answer that I have found in talking to many experts who work on that is really try to find the intervention points along the whole way, starting from data. From every step you do, is there an intervention point where I have to ask myself, is it fair, is it transparent, is it responsible, whatever criteria you want to use. And then there is regulation. And I think most people would agree that regulation is necessary, but also that it is very difficult. It is difficult because the law always lags behind. Every innovation is by definition ahead of the law. Because it keeps evolving. It's not once it's there and then you can regulate it, it keeps evolving. And the law comes at a certain date, it has to regulate. This is allowed, this is not allowed, this is risky, this is not risky, how do we identify what it is? So all this makes it much more difficult. But if you have a system asking yourself continuous, is this a possibility of having an intervention point to ask myself, to ask my colleagues, is this according to the ethical principles or to the regulation that I would like to follow? Anna Bradford is a Finnish lawyer who has written an interesting book comparing the approaches of regulation followed in the United States of America, in China, and in Europe. Basically, in the US, it is market driven, so it is for as little regulation as is necessary. Some of you may have followed the congressional hearings where Sam Altman and others convinced Congress or tried to convince Congress that as little regulation is good, but also that there would be self-regulation on the part of large international corporations. Now we know self-regulation, because it's voluntary, has limitations. And we know that in China, it's the government of the Communist Party that sets the tone, that regulates. And in Europe, we have tried to follow what we call the value-based approach. And recently, after quite a number of years, there's a whole bunch of AI legislation that is quite interesting to look at. The latest one is the so-called AI Act, where indeed AI is being regulated based on a risk-based approach. This means there are certain kind of AI effects that are considered to be in the red zone, in the orange zone, in the green zone. And this means you can change, things will evolve and then you can say, okay, you go from the red to the orange or the orange becomes red. So it gives you certain flexibility, which I think solves part of this dilemma the law always has. But we are only at the beginning. It has now passed the European Parliament. It will only begin in 26. So there is still lots of work to be done. And of course, the question for you here in the audience, where's the place for Africa? What kind of regulation would fit you as a continent? It's markets for the US, it's value-based, which of course are European values. It's the Communist Party line for China. Where's the place of Africa for regulation? What kind of regulation would correspond and meet your needs? I will hurry up a little bit because I want to have a discussion with you. And here I want to go back to a saying that every practicing scientist resonates very deeply with every practicing scientist. You understand only what you make. and boys or girls that in their young years like to play around, take things apart, learn by taking things apart, even if it may be very difficult to put them together again. This is how you learn. This is a saying that goes back to Giambattista Vico, who was an Italian Enlightenment thinker in the 18th century. And for him, this was one of the guiding principles of the future science that he was advocating as an Enlightenment thinker. We understand only what we make. So let's make things because we learn to understand by making instead of just reading the book by the ancients and so on. And this raises the question, do we still understand what we made? Or do we now live in a world that is more and more beyond our understanding? I want to begin with the Anthropocene, this new era in the history of our Earth. Some of you may know that there is the Geological Association. The world geologists will decide most likely this year whether indeed this will be recognized the Anthropocene. The beginning of no geological year because they are the gatekeepers of the dates of the Earth. And obviously, when we look at climate change, we understand more and more, but at the same time, we don't understand much about the interactions of the atmospheric currents, with the sea currents, and so on. So you have this enormous complexity. We don't understand very much anymore as a human-made world because we also we have the possibility of creating a mirror world, digital twins. We can, in principle, create digital twins of every object that we have on Earth. But do we understand how it works together? We can create a digital twin, but do we know how the digital twins we make relate to each other? Again, we face a bewildering complexity. But then there are also fascinating new research questions. I spoke to a friend of mine who happened to be a mathematician, and I asked him early on how satisfied he was that he was using an advanced version of ChatGPT. And he said, well, I gave the AI, I gave it an algebraic problem, but that was sort of medium difficult, and it did extremely well, made slight mistakes, but also a good mathematician. But he said, what really surprised him was the way how the AI arrived at the result was different from what the human mathematician would have done. So the way to get there was different. And this is just a little episode, but it raises the question for me. Does it mean our brain works differently from the machine? Probably yes. But it might also be related to mathematics as a cultural invention. Because the Babylonians had mathematics, the Chinese had mathematics. Mathematics has evolved over the century. It's evolved. So maybe it's, the pathway of mathematics is different from what the machine does. It's a research question, and I find it fascinating. And then, of course, we have the question about language, because now the ChatGPT uses this enormous pool, what is available in text. There were people who were afraid we would run out of text. Now you can use synthetic text, but what does it do to the way how we use language? And how will it change our language? Language is an important part of what we understand being human. Then there are questions about identity. Young people who spend so much time now with discussing with an AI, and especially in young years, our youngsters are puzzled by who am I, they want to get answers. Then they get answers that are filtered through the machine, and what does it do to them? So again, these are open research questions, and research is there to answer interesting open questions. But first, you have to formulate the open question. And then, just to conclude here, before I come to my last slide, I was very struck by coming across a book by Marshall Salins. He's a very famous anthropologist who died recently, and he wrote a book collecting his life's work about the way he calls it most humanity lived in a world which was populated by spirits, by ghosts, by others that were not human, by gods and so on. So he insists, and he has many examples, they lived together in one cosmos. Difference was humans were mortal, but these ghosts, gods, and others were immortal. That was the difference. And sometimes I wonder whether we are now entering another stage of our evolution, where we will learn to live with AI. I'm not saying we are going back to a kind of, cosmos where we attribute to them the ghosts or spirits. But we will have to learn to live with these digital others in new ways. And it is an open evolutionary, co-evolutionary process. Humans and the machines that were designed by humans. And we are at the beginning of this learning. Now, part of my title also was about wisdom. That's always a dangerous concept to speak about. But I tell you where this line comes from. I was at a conference where the organizers had working groups, and instead of giving us a different color or a badge or something, we were given different haikus. Haikus are Japanese poems, short poems. The first line has 5 syllables, the next 7, and my haiku, I did not like it. It did not make any sense. And on the way back from the conference, I was sitting in that lane and said, now I write my own haiku. And I did. I don't say it was a great haiku, but this was the last line of my haiku. And I was captured by this phrase, future needs wisdom. And wisdom, therefore, I think is more than just ethics and regulation. We need a sort of, an ethos, a spirit of caring, a spirit of opening up that goes beyond regulation, beyond the ethical principles that have all these problems. And for science, I like very much this quote that comes by a famous physicist. And I think it holds true for AI as much as for any other field of science, but for AI in particular. Science is what we have learned, not through ourselves. And this means you always have to be skeptical. And organized skepticism is a virtue of science. You don't just believe what your colleagues tell you. You have to find out whether you can really rely on them or not. And find that the way of being in an organized way. I wish that in our social life, in the way how we run our society, we would have more of this organized skepticism. And finally, wisdom is based on experience, on your competence, but also it's an open-mindedness, being open for a pluralistic world that is different for each of us, and yet there's a common good to strive for. So, thank you. This is the pluralistic cover titles of my book that have been translated into different languages. So So thank you very much. And now I hand over to Ulrich.
Well, thank you very much for an extremely illuminating and exciting and mind-twisting and expanding talk and lecture. Thank you so much. I'm sure all of you have 1,000,001 questions. We have 45 minutes for a Q&A, and the way we'll do it is that we'll run a 35-minute panel discussion with 3 of our student names. And then the last 10 minutes, we'll open the floor to questions from the public. So like that 3 AIMS panelists to the stage. Just give us a minute to help to just sit up. And in the meantime, chat with your neighbor about the interesting question you have on your chair.
Because you're continuing, that's fine. 1 second. There we go.
With moderators.
I'm the students of moderators.
Oh, the students do everything else.
Every day they're capable. Everyone, thank you so much for staying on for the Q&A and panel discussion. I'm going to introduce Linda, Catherine, and Anas. Actually, I'll introduce Catherine, and then they'll go in turns and introduce themselves. They're all master's degree students here at AIMS. So Catherine comes from Ghana. She's a graduate from the University of Ghana. She's worked in numerous tech roles before. She was a data analyst for the National Statistics Department of the government of Ghana, and she joined us in January. She's part of our AI stream. And then, Catherine, you want to introduce the rest? And I'll be Professor Nowotny in our students' capable hands.
Okay, so as a viewing orientation, my name is Catherine and I'm from Ghana, and I'm studying the AI for Science Masters here at AIMS. So I will hand over the microphone to Anas to do his introduction.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for driving or flying all the way here. Thank you as well, Professor Helga, for the nice talk. I'm Anas from Egypt. I'm currently enrolled in the AI stream at AIMS. I'm interested in reinforcement learning, and we hope that will entertain you with the questions that the students have collected. And I'll hand over to Linda.
Hello everyone, I'm Linda Damini from Sutherland, and I'm happy to be a part of this panel discussion. Well, I'm a student here in the structured master's program, and I'm deeply interested in quantum computing. So hope you enjoy. Thank you.
So let me give. Okay, so let me kick off with, we'll get a little bit back to the basics. So during our talk, during your talk, you mentioned, or we assumed that AI is smart, but I think one of the first questions that would come to the audience's mind is, how do AI systems get smart in the first place?
If we, does it work? Now it should work, yeah. I think we are taken in by the term artificial intelligence. I can assure you, if we were to find the name today, nobody would opt for artificial intelligence. Because first of all, we don't even know enough about human intelligence, but it has triggered an interesting line of research about the intelligence of other living organisms. And you can have a definition of intelligence of any living organism. They have to survive. They have to find food. They have to know where there is light, how to guard against being eaten or destructed by another. So if you go to this kind of basic intelligence of living beings, think that we are part of the continuum. We are not so special. But we do have difficulties because it's called artificial intelligence. You think the machine is smart, and your question is perfectly all right. How does it get smart? I would slightly divert it and would say, what kind of smartness are we talking about? And there we say, okay, and you have made this experience yourself. Sometimes it's very stupid. Does not understand the most basic. Or if you look at the development of robots, in some cases it's fantastic what they do. Medical field, they are able to deliver medicine to an organ with the tiny robots that you put into the classroom. It's wonderful. And then the robot that we call a social robot cannot do the most simple things with a 3-year-old child. So again, what kind of smartness are we talking about? But let me assure you, we should not continue to compare human intelligence as intelligence with machine. They are tools we have created for certain tasks. We should monitor whether they fulfill these tasks, whether we can improve them to be better in the tasks we want them to perform in the future. So this is the kind of smartness we would like them to get, but that's about it.
Okay, so I think this clears up some of the confusion some of the audiences might have had. So right now, the right way to think about AI would be not as smart machines that have some agency, but as some expansion of our intelligence or something that's capable of complementing what we cannot do well. Is this correct?
I spoke in my talk about outsource, or you can call it delegating. We outsource some of the faculties where we know a machine is definitely much faster. It can be more accurate in diagnosis in the medical field. It's fantastic what the machine can see in terms of pattern recognition. With the human eye, with very trained, very experienced doctors and nurses. So all this is great, of course. But we delegate part of our agencies, but we have to be able to keep some control in the end, because it's as with every airplane, the automatic pilot is a great thing. You can get into a situation and there have been very serious accidents when the pilots were no longer able to switch from automatic pilot. And the trained pilot needs to know what to do. And if I can use this as a comparison, we are in many instances in a similar situation where we think the automated way how AI functions is great, but it saves us time, it saves to pay for the salary of people, etc. But if we hand over control completely, we are in immersive, we really lost because we lose. We gain other, we lose some.
Okay, so in light of this, some people have been, myself included, enthusiastic about the applications of AI in education, for example. Having AI or agents or systems teach young children, of course, comes with its own risks. However, there are lots of benefits to reap as well, because you can, AI agents are scalable, so every child can have access to a very high quality customized tutor that is able to answer their questions. So in light of this, what would be the ethical concerns and considerations if we were to integrate AI into large-scale education across the world?
We have to exercise common sense. It's not so much an ethical principle, it's common sense. Like every parent, you want your child to attend school because the teacher, you don't believe everything that the teacher teaches your child. Right? You want to, as a parent, you say, well, we have different kinds of teacher, and this teacher tends to, it's not the right thing. And I think it is similar. We have to keep watch over what in the AI, but I fully agree, and especially in African countries where you have too few teachers. It's an enormous potential. You should really go in. Don't lose the common sense that you, as a parent of a child, would have to watch over what is it teaching my child. Is this, am I in full agreement with it? Do I trust it that it gives it more knowledge and not skill? Let's go into a direction which I think for whatever. So exercise common sense and critical. One side to the other, yes.
Definitely.
There's a mic.
That's sufficient.
Well, based on the topic that you gave to us, I believe, and I can see that you are more because can be like simple question about market. Now you're facing market. What it is to say something with math. From your last slide, you talked about which we should concern about. And my question would be, when can you say that actually gas would be now? So like we have intelligent ones. When can you say that the price? Because we talked about brightness is based on experience and
I would reserve wisdom for humans. I don't think there is a wise AI, maybe in 500 years or beyond 5,000 years. But humans should cultivate wisdom. And it relates back to what I said here, don't leave out common sense thinking, but also, as I tried to show, wisdom for me is this combination of experience, of openness, of caring also for what I call the common good, That's what we associate with it, and the kind of critical thinking, because otherwise you are not wise if you don't do it. I would define it also as what is missing. And we have intelligence, we have smartness, we have effectiveness, we have all the things that drive our contemporary world. But I think something is missing, and I would call it wisdom.
The second one would be, now we have AI things, and to some extent very them, well, put in place to some extent. And then when we make mistakes, who are we to blame? Is it the AI system or actually the people who design and change that?
This is a question that touches something where we have no answer. Because partly it's again the law that technological innovation. We have, of course, legal systems that have evolved to harm another person, the law, and what kind of harm it is, the criminal or civil, the civic law, which holds you responsible. And you have different legal systems that judge it in slightly different ways. These legal systems have not been developed as yet to deal with AI. And then the question is, there was this publicity stunt in Saudi Arabia. We had a robot by the name of Sophia, and Saudi Arabia, one kind of system, this robot gets now Saudi Arabian citizenship. Right? What the publicity stunt. But I am very reluctant to say we should give them right the person because they are not. And I would be against making an AI a citizen because what does it do to a citizen if an AI can be the law involved? And this is why I think what we need also, I spoke about regulation, but regulation again does not fall from the sky. You need good lawyers. You need lawyers who are genuinely interested in developing the legal system further to accommodate the kind of problems that we have. Now there's a sort of makeshift gift and autonomous vehicle give someone who has to do with the laws that we have. And then you employ these lawyers, you employ other lawyers, you get more lawyers in the future, fighting with each other and with courts and there is judges, etc. So we are feeding the legal system that we have that is deficient because it has not been yet absorbed. So if you ask me for a policy, I would say find young people who want to become AI lawyers. You need them to develop, not just applying all of them to fight against other lawyers in the law. It's for everyone, but it does not solve the problem. So go out, go to your law faculties, and find young people who are genuinely interested in developing the new law. But that's what we need. It's not that, so there is no good answer.
But I can say that that's already to combine with all the places. So maybe I can give the next week a chance.
Yeah, okay, so I think we've all spoken a lot about AI and society, the integration of AI and humans. So my first question would be that how do we ensure the responsible integration of AI in our societal framework?
Well, as I tried to show, I mean, we need certainly an ethical step. We need regulation. We need something that goes beyond. And we call it ethos, we call it wisdom, because the feeling of being responsible, partly it's a moral imperative. You are feeling responsible because you have consciousness or you have a religion or a philosophy or whatever else you be responsible. You're not alone in this world. If there are other human beings and you're responsible. You're responsible for the environment because in the end, it's humanity and we are part of humanity. You need this kind of approach. But again, it's good then not that the definition you are responsible for the actions given these circumstances. And if harm occurs, who's going to pay for it? Something part of the law. And you have a moral responsibility, which not everyone shares. But people, being morally responsible, I care. You have to work in society with many different kinds of levels of responsibility. Working.
So I think it's looking up, I think that's good. The next question is I want to regulation, more towards the regulation. So in your talk, you mentioned about how governments and then the bodies themselves set regulations for them to regulate AI basically. So in your opinion, what's the effect of AI regulation on like global economic competitiveness? Because sometimes, like you mentioned, Africa, what do we do about Africa? How do we set regulations for Africa and to meet our needs? So what do you think that?
Look, unfortunately, the world has entered a very difficult phase right now, where we are less inclined to work on the basis of international cooperation. And given the geopolitical tensions, starting with the geopolitical tensions between the US and China, which has repercussions around the world, we feel that this it makes regulation at an international level much more. Because if you cooperate, you can more easily reach consensus. If you see each other only, every step of it makes international regulation very. Now, you may remember that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of safety AI safety conference, and his basic idea was to set up an AI safety. In the meantime, this has become consortiums. And 200 just out of the ground. But it's mainly about cyber attacks, so safety in the sense of the word of cyber. And even there they have difficulty in finding sufficient staff. They want to try what should practice also here the French team approach or geopolitical or this is to develop very astute way in more clever than we are. And so that's one way where he hopes to get some. But right now, I must say these geopolitical tensions very unlikely we can reach the kind of minimum step of global regulation.
Okay, so this would be my last question, and then we'll go back to questions from the live audience. So you mentioned that regulation in general is like the big giant dinosaur that moves slowly, while we have AI. We have never seen any field that grows as fast as AI. So we're in totally new territory in terms of regulation. do you think the way that we approach our law making should change to adapt to the fast pace of AI, such that the laws don't become outdated?
You put it very well. You know, I've been thinking, I mean, as a European, I find what the European Union has done in terms of regulation is really at the forefront, which does not mean it could not be better, but it is at the forefront because it adopts this risk-based approach where it gives you more flexibility. You know, things will change and then you can say, okay, now we have a new risk that we did not know about before, and now we can change. But first of all, every regulation you have to implement. And you have to make sure that you have the ways of monitoring, following what is happening, and of making sure implementation of sanctions and sanctions must be executed. Otherwise, it will take time and nothing will happen. So that's very important. But to change the way law making, you know, law is a very old human invention. And in ancient times, people gathered once a year and they discussed, you know, conflicts resolution, etc. But we need a much more flexible rolling approach. I can only repeat myself and say, you know, go and find these young lawyers who are willing to really take it upon themselves and also to tell our parliaments, you know, the way how we make laws, it's out of question. This is because we think the law must last for 10 years or longer. But you know, we have it deployed, so maybe 1.5 years. So how can we bring this into? So we need more flexibility in the way. But don't forget.
Pastor Helga, thank you so much. This ends the panel discussion, panel questions. Now we'll move on to the live audience questions.
Yeah, but let me say you were great.
One a rolling microphone, so maybe get 5 audience questions at most, starting from the back. I'll just move around. You can introduce yourself as well.
In that tall building over there. Thanks. This was really a very exciting meeting, and I want to thank Professor Nowotny for the very warm and easy way in which she introduced something which I think still intimidates many people, particularly my age group. But I also just have been thinking, and I work in the field of innovation and creative problem solving. And so to me, it's been very interesting to see my colleagues are younger, so they get me, and to see how we can use sources of knowledge or ideas from artificial intelligence to trigger new ideas. But we must not forget the importance of creativity, imagination, and what I call natural innovation, natural intelligence. And it seems that this is an Austrian function. I always think as my role model of natural intelligence was Hundertwasser. Hundertwasser was someone who was just spontaneously, naturally intelligent, do anything to make things happen. So some people might know about it, some might not. But to me, it must still be that courage to go to come up with new ideas. And then on the other hand, we also need social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and cultural intelligence to make sure that the wisdom that you spoke about is there. Because I think particularly cultural biases in Africa, problems like racism and things like that, that sometimes surface through artificial intelligence because it's dealing with old material. So I think it's very important that those human intelligence are also balanced and look to establish that balance.
Thank you for your comments. Let me just add that I think, creativity is to be found everywhere, not only in Austria.
Do you think AI raises any new questions?
I don't have, a complete catalog of ethical questions that humanity poses. I think every age, every situation in which we find ourselves, we have some new ethical questions. And also, we tend to think values are something that does not change, which is not the case. Values change with societies and with the evolution of humanity. Let me just give you one example that for me was very striking. In the 1890s in the US, in a district where most people were workers in coal mines, it was considered to be unethical to have a life insurance, because the idea was only God knows when you die. So you had these miners in the coal mines who would die, and lastly it was the women who had to feed the children without the father, who organized themselves to speak up against it and to make life insurance something that enabled them to feed their family. It was a value, God knows what, so therefore you cannot touch life insurance. It's for me one of the striking examples, but there are many examples where values can change, and values change according to the way how we live, how we evolve, how we agree. And so I think, yes, there are new issues, ethical issues, but they are not only arising from AI. I think the world, wherever we look, approaches us and confronts us again and again. Are these the kind of ethical choices that we should make, that we will make? Because in the end, it's about how can we live together in a way that benefits one of us, not
Another old friend. I want to refer to Isaac as a metaphor. Say one gathers that Hari Seldon, who ran the universe, was an android. And do you think humans there are lots of humans with a moral philosophy, lots of very basic instincts about survival and biology? Do you think that could be trusted with our survival rather than a Hari Seldon would be the equivalent of AI?
Well, science fiction is great, and we can have a discussion on all the different characters and principles. I think what science fiction does, it's not about what will happen in the future. There are always some nice technical gimmicks you find in science fiction. Science fiction really is a nearer image of concerns that people have. And so this is the way how I read science fiction. Tells you we have concerns, we have problems, and this may be one way how to solve them, but again, it can
Yes, my name is Walter Matthews. I'm a retired controlling job. And my focus is, this one discussion on job loss. My focus is on the EU AI and regulatory acts is AI systems should be overseen by. Then there's the White House Blueprint AI bill, and it basically focuses on human alternatives, considerations, all that. My question: with these new regulations, shouldn't this be an opportunity to create new career paths if you could ultimately have people who are managing, overriding, addressing questions from human beings with these AI systems possibly controlling our lives?
Nobody knows which new jobs that will arise. I mean, we have some ideas of kind of jobs that are needed. We also have some idea of the jobs that we should not permit. And here I refer in particular to the kind of work that should be done in Africa by African workers who had to screen child pornography and other content that was very damaging to their mental health and well-being, apart from the low wages they got. So I think we also have to keep an eye on jobs that should not be done. But there will be any number of new jobs. Now, what is interesting, if you look at the economics, there are a few economists who have done serious work. Very often it's, economists don't believe that it is economy. But, there are some people whose work can really deem very highly. And this is David Author from MIT. And he did a study on who gains in terms of productivity with AI. And his answer is what we are paying for is expertise. So in a society, and this is what you get when you come here to the school, when you come out, you have a nice certificate, and you get a higher pay because you are an expert in something. Now, AI will create more expertise because it will not just be people like you, but certain other things will be done together with you and AI. So expertise will become more widespread, which means it will be valued less, and its value is economic value will get down. This means the middle classes, the professional jobs will go down in terms of monetary value. And David Author says the people who gain most right now are the most lowly skilled workers, because in connection with AI, they are more productive. Now, whether this translates into higher wages is another question. But it is also for unionizing, and this is not organized argument. But it's an interesting argument to look into. Why are we paying some people more than others? And if you think in terms of peace and child rights, everyone is to gain from the expertise that we've been having. Schools, that's in whatever, from technologies, more expertise but then you have to translate it into economic realities, bargaining power. You have to say, who wants what, gets what, so then
Thank you very much, Rob. We are almost at time, so we'll have a break very soon with tea and coffee, and there will be plenty of opportunities to have a very lively discussion. I want to conclude with the last question, if I may. Many universities and teaching institutions and high schools, the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, friends from the University of Cape Town and from the University of Western Cape, Stellenbosch, who are all here, all need to teach students how to think. And in the beginning of your talk, you mentioned that the printing press allowed a proliferation of ideas and knowledge to spread. Do you have any wisdom about what AI's impact will be and how in this world where people can compose essays, AI assistant, and where an AI assistant could answer our first and second and third year math questions perfectly, how we could still teach students to think?
Yes. I think AI is, in this sense, a good disruptor of our educational system. And it disrupts in a positive way because it means you cannot just rely anymore on multiple choice tests or, getting an essay, because AI can write an essay. And even if you develop a software that can detect whether AI uses. I recently read something by a professor of English literature who had his students write on Dostoevsky. And he was very upset because the AI used the word self all the time. He thought this is nothing that characterizes what Dostoevsky ever wrote about. So he was very easily he could spot that it means it no longer works. So we have to come up with new way of teaching, new way of interacting with students. The same applies for job interviews. If you can get an AI to write you the most beautiful job application, it will come to nothing. We have to go back to do interviews. And then you have people who prepare you for the interview. So you have to be always ahead. It needs more human interaction. And I think this is, in a way, AI holds up a mirror to us. And by looking into the mirror, we discover also what is it we are lacking. And I think we need more human interaction. And creativity also comes out of talking to each other, comes out of sharing, of discussing. And I think that's the great chance we have if we use it well.
So the future might be, in some ways, less automation and more personal interaction.
Yes.
Thank you. I would like to invite the head of our House of Science, Dr. Joyce Gabi, to come to the stage, and she is going to say a few final words, and then that concludes the day.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are we still here? Awesome. So my name is Rejoice. Thank you so much, Ulrich, for driving the bus. It has been a nice ride, isn't it? And special thanks to Prof. Helga and our panelists. You were awesome. And I just want to also send a special thanks to all of you who came this afternoon to support us. It's 4 hours here in Muizenberg. So we really appreciate your support as AIMS family. And thanks to the Embassy of Australian Embassy to really approach hard to establish this relationship. And we hope that it will come to fruitful as we go on. I'm here with a special gift. Yeah, we don't want you to leave this building empty. So, as you registered for this event, we had to do a draw. 15 of you here, you're going to walk out something so special. Yeah? So, and what is that something special? The book? Yeah? You wanna guess which book, by who? Oh, yes. So we are going to give 15 of you Prof. Helga's book on AI We Trust. And then for those who are not going to get a book, we really also value you. You are going to walk up with something. And that something might be not tangible. It can be new collaboration, new knowledge, new insights, new perspective. So that's what AIMS is all about. So we want people who walk through that door not to go out empty. So, are we ready? Okay, so, and the winners are Comfort Jones, Martha, Sandra, Dorcas, Mohau, Doreen, Andy, Richard, Gina, Rieden, Vincent, Chawe, and Linda. So you are all winners. And congratulations to all of you who have won the book. And as Ambassador Romana, so when we put this event, something went right. So in terms of the book, it hasn't arrived here, it will arrive this week. So after our session, you leave us with your address. We will make sure that that book is there in your door, okay? So that's the promise. Thank you so much. And in closing, as AIMS family, we really want to appreciate your support. As Ulrich said, this was the first public. We were not too sure, will they show up? You know, when you organize the event, but you are here for the 4 hours. We really appreciate your support. And Professor Helga to fly all the way to be with us this afternoon. Can we give her a round of applause, please? Don't she come with her daughter? And then to make sure that she's here on time, we're here 2 hours in advance. So can we also give her daughter a round of applause? So I'm using the community. We are who we are and aims because of the Museum community. We value your support, and as we grow as family, we want to grow with you. Thank you so much. And lastly, I want to thank all AIM staff, all AIM supporters from the local university to come. This is a collaborative effort, and we hope you will join us in future to make sure that we deliver a really impactful event. Thank you so much. Okay, now this is the end of our public lecture. There is some nice refreshment. Please continue. She's here with us. If you want to ask more questions, if you want to network, it's over to you now. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Ulrich, for being our leader and take us to this afternoon. Thank you so much.